Every historical event has its own catalyst that triggers significant changes. Sometimes the catalyst is a literal event, like the actions of Gavrilo Princip. Other times, it is symbolic, like the salvo from the cruiser Aurora. In the case of the American Revolution, the catalyst is often created post facto to facilitate the understanding of history. In reality, the causes and consequences of the American independence movement from Britain are too complex to be summarized in a few sentences. However, in the next few minutes, with the support of credible sources, we will delve deeper into this topic by clarifying the confusion of terms. The American War of Independence and the American Revolution are often considered identical by most people. The term revolution is frequently chosen because it sounds more romantic and heroic. However, according to the founders of the United States, such as John Adams and George Washington, there is a clear distinction between the two terms. The War of Independence began in 1775 and ended in 1783, but the American Revolution actually started in 1765 and reached its peak over a longer period. To understand its root causes, we must look further back to 1763 when the 7 Years' War ended. Many historians refer to this war as the First World War because it involved various countries fighting for global dominance. Britain emerged as the primary victor, gaining control of almost all of North America, previously held by France, and becoming the world's hegemon, controlling nearly every aspect of trade. However, this victory came at a great cost to Britain. King George III felt the need to restore the nation's finances by implementing strict mercantilist policies. Mercantilism emphasized that the state should control the economy and keep wealth within the country by any means necessary. Ironically, mercantilism, which initially developed in Europe, was also applied to the American colonies. After the 7 Years' War, Britain imposed various restrictions on the American colonies, such as prohibiting manufacturing, trading with other nations, and certain products. Consequently, the colonies were always in debt to Britain because they imported more than they exported. However, what George III did not anticipate was that the American colonies consisted of immigrants who had dared to leave everything behind in Europe to seek a new life in the New World. They were not merely farmers or subjugated locals, but descendants of people who had risked their lives for freedom. Furthermore, many British colonies in North America were inhabited by various ethnic groups, including the Dutch in New York, formerly New Holland, and the French colonies whose inhabitants suddenly became British subjects after the war. This diversity further strengthened the unique identity of the American colonies, which differed from British colonies in Asia and Africa, primarily inhabited by subjugated locals. Another often overlooked factor is that many of these colonies were inhabited by criminals and mercenaries who had gone to America to seek new opportunities. American historian Daniel Boorstin noted that about 50,000 criminals were sent to the American colonies, adding to the diversity and resilience of its inhabitants in facing Britain's strict policies. One of America's leading historians stated that there was nothing bipartisan about the beginning of the American Revolution. It was a minor error on the part of King George III, who underestimated the diverse American population. According to Daniel Boorstin, the American Revolution ironically upheld the provisions of the British Constitution. This is why the American Revolution began in 1765, while the war did not start until 1775. One of the greatest myths taught in textbooks is that the American independence fighters always wanted independence from Britain. In reality, as Boorstin explained, half of the British colonial population was satisfied with their condition before George III's new policies, while the other half desired a republic, anti-colonial reforms, or did not fully understand the situation. Here is where one of the main points arises. The American Revolution was not just about fighting Britain, but about the colonists deciding the fate of their future as a different nation. This brings us to the catalysts and the sequence of important events. The Boston Tea Party is often cited as a turning point. There is a myth that tea taxes were raised in Britain, whereas in reality, they were lowered, but only for British tea, which angered the Dutch tea smugglers in America. The role of the bandits in the Boston Tea Party was significant, as they shifted the focus from tea to the issue of representation of the colonies in the British Parliament. When news of the tea destruction spread, it was considered the beginning of the War for Independence. But how could independence occur if there was no unity regarding relations with Britain? Their story began in Boston, 3 years before the Tea Party, on March 5, 1770, when a merchant's apprentice clashed with British soldiers. This incident sparked riots in Boston, emphasizing the principle that they had been oppressed by Britain. After the Tea Party, Britain repealed almost all repressive measures, but the momentum of the revolution was unstoppable. Secret and open meetings of the Patriots culminated in the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia in 1774. The principle was clear. They did not want to live under British rule anymore. An economic boycott was imposed on Britain, and in the Second Continental Congress of 1775, a declaration of war for independence was issued. Even after hostilities began, there was still no unity about the future. The Continental Congress, initially intended only to discuss alternatives, evolved into a real political power governing the rebellious colonies. This is why many trace the records of U.S. presidents back to this Congress. One of the first decisions of the Congress was to grant the colonists rights equal to those of British citizens, marking an important step in the history of the American independence struggle. Historian Daniel Borston's version makes sense in many ways. The American rebels, in essence, were trying to restore the conditions of Britain before the era of George III. African Americans played a crucial role in this struggle, with many of them promised freedom if they sided with the rebels. According to an officer in Washington's army, almost every regiment had a significant presence of black soldiers. On the other hand, Native Americans took a lukewarm part in the conflict, realizing that neither side would improve their lives. Contrary to popular belief, the American revolutionaries were not like David against Goliath, because America had support from various sides. Many European countries, including France, Prussia, and Russia, provided aid to the rebels, with the French Expeditionary Corps playing a crucial role in key battles of the War of Independence. Although the Declaration of Independence of the United States was issued on July 4, 1776, in the early years of the war, there was no certainty about how the new country would be organized. The Continental Congress de facto managed the war, but the concept of a united nation did not form until several years later. It was not until 1781, after years of intense warfare, that the Confederation Congress was established to govern the United States. However, the first Congress did not have enough power to effectively govern the country, and the issue of nationhood remained a problem even after the treaty with Britain. The war ended on September 3, 1783, but Britain's surrender was accepted by an amorphous committee of the Founding Fathers of the United States. Throughout the 1780s, various systems of government were considered, including some monarchical options. In 1786, a proposal to make Henry of Prussia the King of America was considered. In 1787, Alexander Hamilton proposed the idea of being led by an elected king who would rule for life, except in cases of impeachment. Amid this chaos, Britain believed that the rebellious colonies would soon return under their control, and this situation of a weak alliance persisted until 1789. However, in 1787, a group of representatives from various states managed to agree on a draft of a new constitution, which was adopted in 1789. In the same year, George Washington became the first president of the United States. This year is considered the end of the American Revolution because the struggle was not just about fighting Britain and gaining independence, but also about how the new country would be organized and governed. If you are interested in the events that happened after the Revolution, you are welcome to watch our video on the history of the United States. Thank you, and see you again, friends.